All wings report in. Austin standing by.
Mike, standing by.
Austin, standing by.
The Rogue 3 podcast is locked on target. Whether it's movies, shows, books, comics, or more, we're going to be coming to you from a galaxy far, far away to celebrate all things Star Wars. Hey guys, welcome to our next episode of Rogue 3 podcast. This is going to be about the third arc of season 2 of Andor. We're going to be covering the episodes Messenger, Who Are You, and Welcome to the Rebellion. These were written by Dan Gilroy, and they're directed by Janice Metz. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. I'm not totally sure how to pronounce it. These do start in the second year before the Battle of Yavin. And around this time, we're looking at just rebels happening. The Ghost Crew has met and worked with Saw Gerrera already. And immediately before Secret Cargo, the Rebels episode here that intersects with these episodes, and the Ghost Crew is currently stationed on Adelon, so we haven't made it to Yavin yet. So let's go ahead and get started with the first episode, Messenger.
Yeah, we open on Yavin, which is nice to see. We've seen it sprinkled throughout the series. We saw it in those first episodes with Cassian being on Yavin 2 years earlier and not really knowing the importance that it would play. So it's kind of more interesting to see them here and almost in a relaxed environment versus the intensity of the other places they've been.
It is, and it opens up significantly less intense than some of the other arcs that we've seen this season so far. Bix has opened up every arc so far with the Nightmare, and this time we're not seeing that. It seems like now that she's kind of got, I don't want to say it's her revenge, now that she's conquered closure, now that she's gotten some closure, it seems like she's finally able to sleep.
I also think it's probably the most relaxed like the audience has been in the whole show, probably because it's not only have the characters relaxed, but it's also a familiar setting. Like it feels very much like Rogue One. Like we're starting to see a lot of familiar faces. Like we saw Draven, who was one of the commanders in the show or in the movie, and it just feels it's probably the most Star Warsy the show has felt up until this point. You see like little droids zoom around, you see the couple aliens in the background, you see like X-Wings parked to the side, like, it feels the most familiar of anything we've experienced up until this point.
And it makes us feel so much closer to Rogue One, where that is that very Star Warsy environment. And so we can tell we're getting closer we're with the Massassi group on Yavin, led by General Dodonna. So we're getting visually, we're getting emotionally closer to that culmination of this story.
It's interesting that it feels so familiar, so safe, because as we know, this arc is absolutely anything but safe. Those of us who have watched Rebels, and if you're feeling the building tension, something horrible is about to happen on Gorman. And this arc finally follows through on that. So this episode really is preparation for that.
Yeah, we see Wilman come in to kind of Cassian and Bix's almost domesticitude on Yavin. And he's still working with Luthen. He's still very much in his fold. And he says, Luthen wants you to come back to do some missions for him. And Cassian essentially is like saying, no, I'm with Yavin. I'm with this group. They need me. And I think Cassian's starting to see there's a need for a greater leader. There's a need for greater coordination now amongst these rebel groups. And Luthen is not prepared for that. He doesn't want to go that direction just yet.
And that really follows up on the previous arc where he's struggling to maintain all of these different lines of information. And he really doesn't seem like at this point that he's going to be the future of the rebellion. It seems like Cassian is going to instead work for the Yavin rebels. How about on Gorman? What's happening on Gorman?
What's not happening on Gorman? It's a pretty wild situation over there. We get Syril and Dedra having more time Dedra is getting orders from Partagaz. They're moving past the propaganda stage, and we're getting into the final stretch of action, and they're wanting to lure the gore to the plaza.
It's really kind of alarming to see all of this propaganda happening. We see bits of news anchors who are selling a story that does not seem like the story that we've been watching. It seems like it's very much a cleansed version. Um,
Not even cleansed, but just like factually inaccurate. Like they're just saying, like the way they're describing the events is just not. It's just not what is happening on the ground at all.
I think there's one that we see where they say, the death toll can't even be calculated. It's unknown at this time. It's probably because there is none. It probably didn't really kill that many people, but they're just saying it can't even be known at this point. We don't know the devastation that this has caused because it hasn't. It's all manufactured. It's all fake.
Well, and you hear like the camera zooms past a couple different newscasters, and they're all like saying the exact same thing. And it just shows like the reach of the Imperial propaganda machine.
Even Dedra is feeling nervous about the operation going on in Gorman and feels like it's getting out of control. That it's spiraled so much further than she was really comfortable handling, and Partagaz has to almost bring her back down and say, hey, you need to calm down. Like, you need to come back. You need to be emotionally under control, because if you're not, this isn't going to go well.
Was that excellent line from Partagaz this arc, or was it last arc? What did he say to her? Do you remember?
He says it in both Messenger and Who Are You, about her needing to calm down, but I can't remember the specific line.
And one, he says, "You seem animated," or "You're animated." But I can't remember the even better one was the one before, and I can't remember.
I think that's this one. So we see that Partagaz has brought in someone else to essentially be more of the boot on the ground, so to speak. It's Captain Kaido, who is considered to be a crisis specialist for the Empire. And I love that term, because it makes me think he's a specialist at creating crises for them to then manipulate and use however they see fit, right? We think of a crisis specialist as someone who's going to calm everything down, de-escalate, but this is the direct opposite. He is manufacturing a crisis.
Do we think he's brought in because Dedra is not doing what she's supposed to be doing? Is she kind of failing here?
Well, I don't think it's that. I think it's more so just getting all the pieces in play. To like they're doing things. She's an information person. Like, she's not a boots on the ground, get people doing stuff person. So I think bringing in I think it's also a sign to show that we're moving past Dedra's phase of this. Like, Dedra's whole job was to get all of the people riled up and get like all the pieces into place. And now we're bringing in the military to come in and like execute that massacre.
Execute is a good word there. And we see the Gorman front, who she essentially kind of coaxed or stoked the flames of them getting involved and trying to fight back against the Empire. They're very much at a loss for what they should do. They see that the Empire is building essentially a fortress in the square, and they're really lost.
Well, I was going to say, it seems like they're a little bit divided on how they want to proceed. Rylands doesn't want to incite the Empire any further. However, the rest of the crew seems very intent on proceeding as they had planned with their demonstration. I think that's interesting. It shows yet again how divided the rebels are compared to a united empire.
Well, most notably, I think it was probably most interesting in this story, in this episode, is Syril, who we open like him trying to go to work, and he tries to like talk to the rebel group, like he's trying to like, it seems like almost like tip them off. Like he's really struggling mentally, and it really comes to a head in the next episode. But I think there's a lot of questions with what Cyril's motivations are. I think Cyril's like a genuine believer in like order and authority, and like he thinks he's really doing the right thing. I guess Syril is not like a power hungry person. He is pure of heart. Just what he's pure about is just not aligned with what the creators of the story think is a good thing. And he's really struggling to process. I think you see this happen in real life too. He's struggling to put his worldview against what he's seeing happen in front of his eyes, and he can't make reason of it. He's really struggling with that.
Just to touch on it briefly, we do see little pieces of Mothma flash into Coruscant where she interacts with the Gorman Senator Oran. He's warning her. He realizes what's about to happen, and I think he knows that he is not long for the Senate. And we're gonna kind of get a conclusion to that in the next couple episodes.
I like to see that earlier in the season, we see him kind of say, I can't do anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to stick my neck out because it's not going to work. And then he realizes it's too late. They were going to do what they wanted to do no matter what.
I also think a big takeaway from this little scene is that he thanks Mon Mothma for the work she's doing and kind of re-solidifies her as like a thought leader in like rebelling against the Empire. Like he's like, you're like one of the people that stood up for this, and it's really notable for where we know Mon ends up at the end of this arc. She is the face of rebellion for people.
Yeah, she is, and we will eventually get to see her as the actual leader of the rebellion. But for now, the rebel group on Yavin is operating solo. It's the Masasai group led by General Draven and General Dodonna. Cassian's working for them, and his shoulder is injured from a blaster. I like that as we've talked with these year jumps, we see things happen or we learn about events like in the previous one where Bix and Cassian went on a mission and they had to kill someone. We don't get that full story. And as Star Wars fans, sometimes we want to know everything about everyone and their entire story. But this is another one where it's just another mission. Maybe that'll be a comic one day or another story one day, or it'll just be what it is just they do other stuff. We don't get to see all of it.
The show really doesn't like to spoon feed us anything. It just kind of presents it as things that have happened. I was really intrigued actually by this little piece with the Force healer. Cassian is not all about it. I am curious what his thoughts are in general on the Force at this point. Does not seem positive or anything, or it seems like a mystical power that isn't real, perhaps.
Well, I don't even know if we've had the Force mentioned at all up until this point. If it had, it's like been a passing mention. Like this is the first, and we really don't even know if it's legit, but it seems to be. This is the first Force user we've seen in the show this far.
It's really interesting. So she, this Force healer comes up to him, and she really seems to be connecting with him. She mentions that he doesn't always feel something like this. It seems like maybe there is a little bit of, pretend with what she's doing. But with Cassian, she feels something, and she refers to him as a messenger. And I took that very much as a reference to Rogue One, where he will eventually be a messenger of the Death Star plans from Scarif to the Tantive IV. So I thought that was a cool little allusion.
It's interesting to see how perhaps the Imperial propaganda against the Force has really changed the galaxy so quickly to have people not believe, to eliminate the Jedi and have the Force not be something that people are aware of. It has really changed quickly. It seems like some of that influence came from Marva, Cassian says that Marva would be disappointed in you for going to see this person.
I think it's easy to be biased as people who watch the series and say, how could people forget? They were all over the place. Well, they really weren't. Someone would be lucky to see a Jedi in their lifetime that, it wasn't something that people saw every single day unless you were on like Coruscant or something. And so I think it's really easy to have that propaganda to make it seem like these guys weren't good or it's not real or anything like that, to kind of make people lose the hope that they may have had that something better is going to come and save them.
a 10,000 Jedi for the trillions of people in the galaxy. It spreads them very thin.
Which is why it was so easy to get rid of them.
So towards the end of the episode, we see that Cassian is going to go to Gorman. He wants to take advantage of the opportunity that Luthen has presented to assassinate Dedra. That they hear that she's the one running the operation there, and so he's actually going to go and make his way to Gorman for a second time.
And once he's here, he meets the same bellhop that he'd met the year before. There seems like there's significantly stricter regulations this time. Cassian's posing as a reporter. The bellhop actually recognizes him and kind of lets him on through because he doesn't have an official, I don't know if it's like an official license to be here. I don't quite remember. The other employee of the hotel says that she has to report it. But the bellhop seems to be really on his side. And he kind of recognizes that this is Cassian, and he kind of helps him through. Just as a reminder, this is the same bellhop who was present for the original Gorman massacre by Tarkin. And he puts Cassian in the room over the plaza. Like, he puts him in like the most strategic place. So you can tell he's helping out.
One of the last things that we see too is Vel meets with Bix after Cassian has gone and talks about that she's not working with Luthen either. She's working with this rebel group on Yavin, so she has stepped away from Luthen. It really feels like he's losing his pieces for this puppet master. The strings that he was controlling are getting cut slowly. Cassian and Bix aren't working with him. Vel's not working with him. Cinta's now dead. He's losing his control over these various pieces that he's been manipulating for years.
Yeah, this episode really was a spring pad for what's about to happen. The show is really trying to move all of our characters into place. We have Cassian on Gorman. We kind of show Syril starting to I don't know if question is the right word, but he's starting to maybe wonder if the Empire isn't bringing the order that they said they are. If they're lying. And so we're preparing for one of the most devastating episodes of Star Wars TV ever made. Episode 8, Who Are You? And this is where we, of course, will see the Gorman massacre.
In fact, the entire episode takes place on Gorman, and not just Gorman. It basically takes place in the square of Gorman, around that plaza. We don't go anywhere else. The underground is connected to that, and so we're in this huge set, and it's really, really well done to make it feel large in terms of a set that they created.
And the number of extras too. This was a enormous scene that they're creating with all of the Gorman resistance. So one of the first things we see is that the Empire is starting to build a fortress around the square where the armory was first built. It's really interesting to see the entire armory completed. I don't remember if we saw it in the last arc at all, but it's enormous. It's actually a little bit out of place on Gorman, which kind of shows the Empire's presence there as being unnatural. And Cassian can see them building this, and that's no good. He's starting to think that, hey, maybe this hotel room isn't going to work out. I don't know if maybe we get a shot because of this fortress that they're building in the square.
Yeah, he's able to look across and kind of see it, but then they change. They move things around while he's there, and he loses his angle to try and be able to shoot Dedra and assassinate her from his hotel.
One thing that we note as Cassian is leaving the hotel to try to get a better angle is we hear a absolutely stunning line that we've heard before. Rebellions are built on hope, from the bellhop, which was really cool to see the origin of that line.
I like to imagine that he heard it somewhere else and is just passed on for years. That it came from somewhere else, and now he shared it, and then Cassian's going to share that with Jin and so forth.
Going back to the bellhop, this is really, we see this happen a couple times throughout the episodes, but the little thing he did by, he says he made sure Cassian wasn't in the system. that he didn't sit like there's no record of him at the hotel. Is he's just everybody's doing their little bit for the rebellion. He had the line, it's like everybody has their own rebellion. I think Lucen says it. I think somebody else might say it too. But uh, people like you have all these normal people just doing little things to help bring down the empire. I think that's if there's a big theme for the show, it's that.
I like that. I also think it plays into stuff that we've talked about throughout this season, that Cassian, talked with this bellhop about his experience when the Tarkin massacre occurred and sympathized with him. Again, it's the rebels. They treat people well, they sympathize, they talk with them, and then they get treated better. The Imperials come in and they just squash people, they push them out of the way, they don't treat them well, and then it doesn't work out for the Imperials in the end. So it really shows that if you make a human connection, if you treat people well, it's going to benefit and help you in the future. You just don't always know how.
Moving forward to Syril, he's starting to see through the propaganda. He hears reporters reporting things that just aren't factually true. He runs into some of the Gorman front people, and they now know that he is not on their side. And he actually tries to warn them. Ryland's and he actually have a really interesting interaction in a little alcove on the street. He knows that the mining ships have already landed, and he's starting to suspect what's going to happen, or at least that something awful is about to happen. At this point, Rylands is really trying to get people to stop what they're doing, and no one's listening. I think that the pendulum has already started to swing, and they can't stop it. And he's kind of helpless.
Yeah, he tries to go against the tide of moving people, these protesters, and he gets knocked down. I was nervous that he was going to be kind of trampled, a lost casualty before they even get to the square. But we'll see him later in the episode come back.
Well, Syril tries to go confront Dedra, but he's actually escorted into a room with several KX droids and some other Imperial workers. He, of course, escapes and goes to confront her. And this is when he realizes that everything, for the past couple of years with Dedra has been, it seems like she's been using him. I'm not entirely convinced that she doesn't love him. I think that she does love him. I don't think it's entirely been an act. I think that she absolutely used him. But she seems rather distraught at the idea of him getting hurt. She seems like she really wants to protect him. And that's most of what I see Dedra doing throughout this episode is, how can I protect Syril? Where did he go? He's gotten out, of the building where he's safe. So I think she really does truly love him. She's just used him, and he's lost his faith in her. And this is really where their relationship, unfortunately for the three people and me who adored them together, where their relationship ends. He does actually assert a bit of control over her, which is kind of an interesting dynamic because she's really the one in the relationship with the control. And it's kind of alarming. He starts to choke her and really try to figure out what's happening. And that's when she kind of lets it all out for him. And I think that further shows that she does love him. She's finally said, hey, this is what's happening. And it all ends right there. And he leaves. And that was the last time they're going to see each other.
Yeah, that's really his breaking point is learning that the Empire isn't just a force for order. It's a force for whatever they want it to be. Like we said, he believed in noble intentions of the Empire to help people create a safe and secure society, to quote a certain emperor. But he now sees that that's not the truth of the situation, that they're going to destroy the planet to get what they want. And that his promotions have been fake. His plant there has been fake to find these outside agitators that they've never located. It was always the Gorman people, really. And it breaks him.
And he goes, not only does he leave, Dedra in her fortress, but he goes and joins the side of the rebellion. Like, he goes out into the streets and jumps the barricade and is with the Gorman people. And he's just kind of in a daze.
It's always interesting to see him like juxtaposed against the violence that breaks out once this happens. He's just standing there, yeah, completely dazed and just can't process how it got to this point. He was so in the dark that it just ruins him.
Well, at this point, the protesters are starting to gather in the square, and it's actually a little scary. They start to get locked in at all the entrances by stormtroopers. This is when we realize that we're kind of getting to the end of the Gorman front at this point. Nothing has happened yet. The Empire could claim at this point that the stormtroopers were just there to protect everyone, to make sure no one got hurt. But we, of course, know the real reason why they're there. Rylands is not able to get anyone out, and they start chanting and they start singing the Gorman anthem to temper the hostility. I was absolutely enthralled by the Gorman Front song. For those of you who are familiar with Les Miserables, it absolutely made me think of "Do You Hear the People Sing" from that show, and it was stunning. It's been stuck in my head.
It actually gave me Casablanca vibes in the scene from Casablanca where they sing the French national anthem against the Nazis in the bar, and that was kind of the vibe I was getting from this, probably because of the French accents, but
Definitely French resistance. It was very
yeah,
French
for sure.
resistance.
It's led by Lizine, who is the person that interrupted their operation on Gorman the first time in episode 6. He's the one that kicks off that singing and tries to kind of rally the people into a little bit of a calmer attitude. And we see that it doesn't matter how calm they get or that they're nonviolent. It's all planned. It's all set. And Dedra is going to allow them to pull the literal and figurative trigger on this operation when she gives Captain Kaido the go ahead to start his operation.
It's interesting. Kaido refers to himself as the trigger and Dedra as the finger, and he really seems to be giving her ownership of what's about to happen. But it's all his ideas. He's just telling her to give him the go ahead. So it's all his work that she's going to get credit for, regardless of what's going to happen. Which I suppose in a way protects the captain.
Well, I think it's everybody's looking for some little part of themselves to like give themselves some. I'm just following orders. I think everybody's just trying to like rationalize themselves because they know this is about to be awful, and we see Dedra's private reaction to it. We get that scene of her like trying to get her collar off, and she's just like drenched in sweat and just panicking. Like when that was in the trailers, a lot of people thought it was Darth Vader felt force choking her. Like that was the same reaction she was having to the action she just gave. And
This was even better than a force choke.
yeah. And so that's when Kaido sends, I think, Sergeant Bloy. He tells his men to go, I think it's reclaim the monument in the middle of the square. And so they start like making their way into the crowd. And there's no reason they need the monument. It's just because they need a reason to get soldiers interacting with the protesters so that action can happen and the violence can start.
Yeah, they start to push back against each other. They start to kind of jostle for position, and the violence really doesn't break out fully there until Kaido gives a planted sniper the go ahead to really escalate it, to take it to the next level, and he shoots one of those guards and everything breaks loose.
Well, it's crazy because they did all of these things to provoke the protesters. They did so much to get them to take the first step, and they still had to use a sniper to do the first shot. They did everything in their power to get the protesters to do it, but they had to use their own man to get the violence started.
I think that speaks a lot for the protesters and the rebellion in general, although a lot of this show is showing us that the rebels will use some of the same tactics as the Empire. At heart, they're pure. The Empire is the one who's stomping down on them, not the other way around.
When that sniper goes off, it's really like the shot that goes around the galaxy to kick off and take this rebellion to the next level. It's going to lead to the alliance actually being formed, the eventual downfall of the empire. They're the ones that pull the trigger to make that happen. So I like to think that they're the ones that start their downfall here. They just don't realize it yet.
Well, at this point, the violence has absolutely broken out. From both sides, people are shooting each other. Soldiers are falling. The rebellion is falling, and people are just trying to escape. And at this point, the Empire unleashes the KX security droids, which is potentially one of the most brutal parts of the whole episode.
I know there's been a lot of talk about that. Tony Gilroy said that I think a K2SO origin episode was going to be a horror episode. And I absolutely see it, because those droids are terrifying. We've seen them in Fallen Order, and they're hard to fight against, but nothing like this.
I would have loved to see a horror episode with this. I think that would have been absolutely fascinating. As someone who loves horror, I think that would have added quite a lot to this show. I don't know where it would have fit in.
And I personally felt like it was. Like, I thought I was horrified, like seeing these giant, like 10-foot tall robots running around picking up people and hurling them like 30 feet across. Like we saw Mazine, like her head like crack on the ground. You heard her like head crack on the ground. And like there's just no, like you could shoot them as much as you want and they're unstoppable. I certainly thought he achieved his horror goal.
Yeah, I couldn't. It was shudder inducing every time they would pick someone up and throw them against a wall 30 feet away. Or I think it's Enza that is picked up and basically chucked like a sack of flour, and we see her fall and hit the ground, and she's just gone right there. And yeah, they got me. I was hard to watch.
With I feel like with this show, a lot of it is, oh, we know what's going to happen. We knew the Gorman massacre was going to happen, but we didn't know exactly who was going to die. And so this particular moment, since we're working with some original characters who didn't appear in other content, it was kind of exciting in a way that was different from the rest of the show, where we don't know what's going to happen to some of these people. We're rooting for them to escape. And a lot of times we'll be rooting for something, even though we know what's going to happen. Well, this time we didn't know who was going to die. And there was a world where Enza survived. And so I think that made it a little more thrilling. And it was kind of nauseating to watch. At this point, Syril and Cassian finally see each other. Syril is absolutely worked up. He's angry, and he's just beating down on Cassian. And the namesake of the episode, "Who are you?" That's Cassian's line. And I think that's so intriguing that Syril has spent such a large portion of the time that we've known him, almost all of it, trying to seek justice with Cassian. And Cassian has no idea who he is. He asks him, "Who are you?" And we see for a split second, Syril, I don't know if he's realizing what, he doesn't know who I am. What have I been doing? Or if he's confused, why don't you know me? Of course you should know me. But that's really just for a split second, because just moments later, or a half a moment later, he's killed by Caro.
Well, I don't want to breeze past this, because this is quite possibly the most violent we've seen Star Wars before. Like how bloody this fight gets between Syril and Cassian. I mean, it is aggressive, and I think it's really notable because Syril and this whole the massacre happening, Cyril's just in a daze. Cassian's on his mission. He's trying to kill Dedra. He's doing his work, and when Syril finally sees Cassian, that's like something he can lock on to with clarity of purpose, because his whole mission on Gorman was to find the outside agitator. And Cassian had been outside agitator, and he's the person that he spent the whole first season looking for. And while he hasn't been particularly looking for Cassian, these past couple of years, he's been thinking about him constantly. And Cassian's kind of the physical manifestation of this like mysterious rebel that's like responsible for all this. Like it's Cassian is the reason why all this is happening, and so he just loses it. And really, like I didn't know Syril had it in him. Like I didn't know he was capable of fighting Cassian physically the way he did. It's aggressive. Um, we very likely could have seen Cassian die had it not been for violence.
Yeah. I like to think of what Cassian is thinking in that time. At this point, the enemy in the square is the Empire, the stormtroopers, people dressed clearly as the Empire, these soldiers. And he's getting attacked by someone who just looks like a Gorman person. And he's, fighting for his life and he's very sincere of like, who are you? He doesn't know, like, why is this person attacking him? And I like to think that Syril, when he pauses and it seems like he's starting to lower the gun. Star Wars has a habit of when people get a redemption, they have their redemption, they continue fighting in some other way. Well, Syril doesn't get that. We see that not everyone's going to get a redemption, and I like that happens. That he starts to maybe realize that everything he's been focusing on has been wasted over the last several years, and he's going to make that change, and he then doesn't. It's too late. And I like that Caro comes back because he knows it's a trap. He falls down early. That I would have expected him to stay away instead of running into the violence and trying to help people. And we also see Thela, the bellhop, throw the grenade that kicks off a lot more of the violence and explosions. And I think that's when Dedra starts to break, is when that explosion happens. And so we see these people that are, somewhat more minor. They're not the main characters, but they're igniting. There's so much, it's such an ensemble cast, an ensemble event with all of these different people playing important, vital parts.
Rebellion takes more than just the leadership. It takes every single person to contribute. Do we know, does Rylands die by the end of this episode? I don't think he does.
I believe he gets away. Yeah.
He gets away.
I believe Caro gets away.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So does Sam, who we see.
So does Sam, which I was
rescue. Yeah.
Very surprised. I was picturing this entire episode that after what he did to Cinta in the last arc, that he would maybe redeem himself, but go out heroically. I would argue he very much did redeem himself. He just didn't die. He was heroic. He definitely grew in the last year. He wasn't a child anymore.
He's the one that ultimately gives us K2SO. We have the KX droid coming to kill Cassian and very close to doing so, and Sam crashing into him with the speeder and like pins him against the wall and breaks him, and that's what allows Cassian to grab the droid on his way back home, and gives us a beloved character.
How do you guys feel about the overwriting of the K2SO one-shot comic?
It's not going to keep me up at night. I think it's unfortunate. For those of you that aren't aware, back when the Rogue One was coming out, they did like one comic book issue that was about how Cassian and K2SO came to be friends, and it is not the story that we saw presented in Andor. That was kind of a running theme of a lot of the material around Rogue One that had to do with Cassian was kind of overwritten for this show. And while I prefer everything in canon to be nicely aligned, ultimately I prefer a better story to be told, and I'm okay with how this went down.
With how they handled the Tarkin massacre earlier in the season, I thought maybe there was a way that they were going to honor that comic, but I don't feel too much gruff over it being changed. I read it a couple days before the episodes, and it was okay. It was fine. It didn't stand out as overly important. There was no other characters that connected to it, so as Austin said, I'm not losing any sleep over it.
It's pretty easy to just brush it off. It wasn't like a part of a beloved arc that that it was integral to the plot of Star Wars by any means. I think a lot of times when they put out these movies, they think these little stories, there's no way we're going to go back and tell this story. It's not going to be worthy of our time. And so they push out some content, just to give us a little bit of extra stuff before the movies come out or after the movies come out. And this is just one of those instances where we found another way to tell the story, and it fit well into the show. I was excited to see K2 in the show. We'll, of course, jump into that a little bit later.
The last thing I want to touch on is Edie at the end of the episode watching the Imperial broadcast, the propaganda of what's happened on Gorman. And I think, at that moment, she's just a mom. We see her be this overbearing, annoying, frustrating person for Syril, but she's still his mom. And so it's devastating for her. She doesn't know, I'm sure, at that point, if he's alive, if he's dead, what's happening. But it's heartbreaking to watch her see this happening.
I think that, we think of Edie as this overly critical mother. And she absolutely was. And ever since that conversation that she had with Dedra in the first arc, it seems like she's become less critical of Syril. I feel like even though she's still that overbearing mother, I think she's become a little bit less critical, and she's become a little bit more supportive of her son. Oh, emphasis on a little bit. It was absolutely heartbreaking to watch a mother watching her son. She has no idea what's happened to him, and we don't see her find out. At least I don't know if she's going to appear in the next arc or not. But it's so sad. She's sitting there with her friends, and she doesn't know what's happening to her little boy. And we know, of course, that he's dead, and he died absolutely horrifically. And I would be interested to see some resolution to her arc. I don't know if Edie is worth the time in the next 3 episodes to fit in. I think it would be really, really interesting to see her and Dedra have a moment together in the next arc, where we wrap her up a little bit. I would hate for the last time we see Edie to just be her in distress.
Is there anything more you guys want to do before we welcome you to the rebellion?
Episode 8 was a bummer, but episode 9 was probably my favorite of the series so far. So.
I was about to say episode 9 was the number 1 episode of the series. It's one of my favorite episodes of Star Wars TV ever. We have made it very clear that we are a Mon Mothma fan club over here. And this was her Emmy Award-winning episode. If Genevieve O'Reilly does not get an Emmy nomination for this episode, I will die inside. She was absolutely stunning in this episode. She is a terrific actress, and with this entire series, we've seen that. It's so interesting to see her going all the way back to a side character in a cut plot of Revenge of the Sith. They brought her back for a bit part in Rogue One. And then they made this phenomenal show, and they decided we're going to make her a main character. And every single episode, I'm always astounded by how talented she is. She really has brought to life a character who was really nobody. She was one of 2 women, at least named women, in Return of the Jedi. And she had 2 lines maybe. And they have just developed her into one of the most astounding characters, and this is one of her most astounding moments. So getting started here, really this episode can be broken down into before her speech, and then after her speech. So starting before her speech, we see at the beginning of the episode, Senator Oran, the senator from Gorman, is now being arrested. In the wake of the Gorman massacre. I don't know what they're going to try to pin on him. He's obviously innocent. He's not done anything. He was arguing that we shouldn't do anything to try to protect Gorman. And it's game over for him now. And this is where we start to see the arrest of people who are difficult for the Empire. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because the Empire doesn't like them.
Yeah, I like one of his lines is, "It's my people today, it's yours tomorrow." And he says that while Bail Organa is watching. We know 2 years later, it's Bail's people at that point. And so I really like that line from him that, you sat quiet and said nothing when it was the Gormans, And then they came for this, and then they came for that, and it's only going to escalate from here.
There are undeniable real world parallels. And this is the final straw for Mon. Mon's like, I've had it. Like, we're doing something like this. We're not gonna like plot and scheme. Like, I'm going to say something about this because we can't continue to do this any longer. And that's when she has her conversation with Bale. And Bale, she's like, we got to do something, Bale. We've got to like leave the Senate. We've got to get going. We got to go to Yavin. And Bale says that he has to stay. He's like, you need to speak, and I need to stay. Not for like a self-preservation thing, but to try to buy the rebels more time. Bale needs to stay in the Senate to kind of be their voice there.
It's interesting that he's still in the Senate at this point, because eventually Leia becomes the senator for Alderaan. And I think we talked last week that we thought that maybe had already happened, but I think the timeline on that is getting changed around just a little bit, or maybe he's maybe not a full senator. Maybe they're sharing time or doing something else to kind of share that role in the Senate.
I think from an out of universe perspective, it would have been really distracting to have Leia there, like to introduce Princess Leia, like at the at the random episode of the show. Like from a timeline perspective, I think that's probably what it should have been. But I think overall, having Bale there was the right call. It would have been nice to get a little bit of a verbal reference to, oh, my daughter is doing this, or she's here, I'm just the senior senator, or the partial. I don't know how they would want to divide that up, because Bale obviously needed to be here for this episode, but it would have been nice just to get a just verbal reference to his daughter. I agree, she shouldn't have appeared in the episode. It would have been distracting, but I would have appreciated the little nod.
And we see that Bale is very, very involved in the speech planning, or at least the preparations to be able to get Mon Mothma to the floor in the aftermath of what's going to happen. So he's very tied to it.
We do see a cut to Cassian talking to Clea. She's asking him to help evacuate Mon Mothma. And Cassian's done. Cassian tells her, this is it. I'm done with this. He wants to run away with Bix. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. He's done so much with the rebellion over the course of his life, and I think he's ready for a bit of peace. I think he wants Bix to be at peace, and he wants them to go away together. So Cassian tells her he's done. So Clea kind of guilt trips him a little bit, and I think that's interesting. Basically, Clea has zero like patience for human weakness. Like Clea's like, I eat, sleep, I don't sleep, I don't eat. All I do is work the switchboard, and the least you can do is like be on my level. And she's like, we just don't have the luxury to not do this. We have to do this. And this is, as we're starting to see Luthen working with these multiple rebel cells and things, Luthen's aware of the extraction team that Bale is using, and he's like, these people are no good. There's a mole there, and he goes to tell Mon that, and Mon's like, I'm done working with you. She's like, we've been doing all this behind the scene shenanigans. Like, I'm going into the sunlight and speaking my truth. And she invokes Takoma, who was Mon's childhood friend from season 1 that like moved the money around for her. And beginning of this season, Luthen had him killed because he was starting to move away from the mission. And she's like, you want me to go with you, just like Takoma went with you. Like, you're going to put me on your speeder and go kill me somewhere. Yeah, I'm not going to do it. And so Luthen's trying to figure out how to extract Mon. That's why he brings in Cassian.
The other big revelation that came out of her and Luthen's meeting when she went out to practice her speech is that he reveals that Erskine, her assistant, is also working for him. Who isn't he controlling in this story, right? There's so many threads that he has out, and that is another breaking point for her, that the person that seemed closest to her is also working for him, and reveals that it's been 2 years since the wedding, since he was there, that he made that contact and started bringing him under his wing, his control. And she goes back in and dismisses him and wants him out of there. And so someone who is on her side and does care about her, it's too much. And so she kicks him out.
Something that I find interesting that's happening around this revelation, she's kind of interrupted, is she's practicing for her speech. She's writing her speech. She knows she's going to make one. And I think a lot of times in Star Wars, we see these brilliant speeches. What we don't see is that a brilliant speech takes practice, it takes skill. And it's so interesting to see her struggling with that. She's sitting here trying to perfect it. We hear her giving the speech to herself. And she wants to be prepared because she has one shot at this. And something that they're doing in the meantime is they're sweeping for bugs. And we find out, although we could assume, these senators are all being tracked by the ASB. And they want to know, what are they talking about? What's going on? Who's going to betray us? Obviously, they'd known she'd have a high priority target for the past 17 years. We see the ISB has not just her bugged, but we see an entire switchboard of other senators around the building who are bugged. It's interesting. Not every senator is bugged. Clearly, some senators they have no concerns about. We've talked about it before. Some senators are here for status. They're here for, wealth. They're here for not reasons that a senator should be there for. And they're not concerned about them, so they're not watching them.
We actually get to see the senators in action after Gorman, and they are just lapping up the Imperial propaganda. They're bowing the knee. They're capitulating. I can't tell for some of them whether they fully believe or they're just saying this to parrot and know, hey, if I say this, it's going to make me look like I'm on their side. That's going to help me in the long run. Or they fully buy into it. It was interesting to see their speeches talking about the massacre of our Imperial heroes on Gorman and what that means for them and what they have to do to honor those victims of the Gorman terrorists. It was really interesting to see them going through these speeches and whether they fully buy into it or not. I'm not 100% sure, but I liked seeing other people speak before Mon Mothma goes up there.
It's also interesting that this is once again led by the Oath Keeper, who I think is an absolutely fascinating character. This time in the Senate is no longer valuable for Palpatine or even Masamita's time. They're not even showing up. And again, shows that the Senate is absolutely worthless in terms of what they're able to get done. And given all these speeches, it's pretty clear, worthless. But then Bail Organa is able to take some of his time using some sort of obscure procedural command. He's able to grant his time to Senator Mon Mothma.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because it's Bale told Mon, he said, you worry about the speech. I'm going to get everything handled. Like, you're going to get your time to talk. And so what Bale did was he got another senator to get on the agenda. She ceded her time to Bale, and then Bale invoked a thing that Palpatine or the Emperor put into code to allow another senator to do it. He emphasized multiple times, this code section is from the Emperor, and the Emperor allows this to happen. So I just want to put this on the record that this is the Emperor's protocol. And that's very important because it gives more legitimacy to Mon coming forward.
And it's exceedingly relevant right now, at least connecting to American politics, because the word that is used by those senators that she taps into is emergency. And we've seen recently how the word emergency is being used to justify actions, to justify things that perhaps aren't an emergency. And so that's what she taps into when she gets up here. And he essentially says, we've heard them say the word emergency. So that means this emergency protocol can be used to allow her to get up and talk. And so she's using their words to be able to get up there and talk about the cause that she wants, which is the Gorman people, instead of these fallen, poor Imperial heroes that they were all talking about.
And that's when she delivers her Emmy, her try for an Emmy. And the speech is just absolutely incredible. It's everything I could have wanted to be. She really brought it all home. There's so many good lines in it. I mean, we're not going to sit here and read you the whole thing, but it's truly powerful. And I think the most powerful part of it is how it ends, which is she says, "And the monster coming for us all is Emperor Palpatine," and that's like so for so long. Everybody's been so afraid of Palpatine's power, not just his like force power, but his political power and his military power. He just looms over everything all the time, and nobody ever dares invoke his name. But she's like, "I'm putting his name on it. This is his fault, and we can't allow this to go forward any longer." And that's what makes the moment just one of the best Star Wars moments. Is her courage.
I love that she uses the line, whatever monster screams the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a great truth is thinking about Star Wars fans, and the people that scream the loudest about Star Wars seem to be heard more often. And we know that hate breeds views and things like that. So it applies to politics. It applies to social media. It applies to so much stuff around us that whoever screams the loudest gets heard.
Another undeniable parallel to American politics right now.
Yeah, because the gist of the speech is like the war of truth, like just people choosing to not acknowledge what truth is. And it's very easy for these senators to sit here and be like, the true tragedy of what happened on Gorman yesterday is that these Imperial soldiers died, and not that like hundreds of Gorman people were shot down the street. And she's like, you all know this is not accurate, and we can't just sit here and continue to pretend like we've done for the past 17 years. And her courage, that's what ultimately was what launches the rebellion. I guess it takes us to her the post-Senate portion of the episode. Well, as soon as she walks out the Senate chambers, she is met by Cassian Andor, and she immediately does not trust him at all. And he's trying to talk to her about Gorman. He's telling her he was there, and he believes her. And he finally says, "I have friends everywhere," and that's when she finally realizes that he's a safe person. I'm intrigued that I guess she has decided that she can trust Luthen's person. Here I don't think she has much of a choice but to trust him. Well, she doesn't trust him immediately, because like what really seals the deal is when she gets to Bale's people and the other woman pulls the gun on her. And we kind of jumped over this, what was happening during the speech, but we see what's happening with Bale's extraction team and with the Imperial security working together. So Bale had 3 spies coming to get Mon, 2 go to security to try to, like, I forget what they're trying to do, get weapons, I think maybe. And there's a woman and a man. The woman kills the man, and she goes back to meet with her other spy, and she's like, "I thought he was with you." But another notable thing is the security agent goes to the broadcast room, and he's told to shut down the broadcast, and the door is locked, and he's like, "These doors haven't worked in a year," and these 2 like security like maintenance people are like, "Oh, we finally got to it, like it was like on the docket to repair today, and we fixed the door." And you can tell like I don't know that they're like Imperial or like rebel agents, but they're like helping the cause. And again, it's like it's normal people stepping up and doing, in this case it's like malicious compliance. uh, but it was one of my favorite moments in the episode.
I also like that we get just the barest hint from the ISB agent that has been planted on Bale's team, because the ISB says it's someone in Young's group, and that's Lonnie, who is Luthen's spy. And so we assume that's how Luthen knew that this team was compromised. Lonnie couldn't just pull this person out of there. That would be too suspicious, but he can pass the information, and we don't even see him throughout the episode, but that bare mention of him. So he's still there. He's still spying for Luthen. And I wonder, in this next arc, will we get a little bit more from him? Will he carry on, or will something happen?
I'm terribly nervous for him. I don't think good things are coming to him.
No one more nervous than himself.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he'll survive. We don't know. Well, Mon Mothma and Cassian do escape. Her driver, who we have long suspected to be, or known to be part of the Empire,
Season one.
is killed. Since season one, is killed by Cassian just outright, and they hijack her car and they speed off to the safe house. And so it's nice to see the safe house again. That's where he's going to be passing off Mon Mothma to the rebels, who will take her all the way to Yavin. And that is where we start to see some intersection between the Star Wars Rebels episode and Andor. We are going to circle back around to the way the Rebels episode intersects here in a moment. But for now, we're getting towards the end of the episode. Cassian is done with his last mission, quote unquote, and he returns to Yavin to find Bix. They have a very sweet moment where he wants them to run away together. And the next morning he wakes up to find that she has left. And she wants him to continue the cause. He needs to continue the cause, and she doesn't want him to worry about her. So she's left. She's taken herself out of the equation.
And that's really the payoff of the conversation with Belle from the first episode of this arc. At the moment, that didn't seem like the most important thing, but ended up paying a large dividend in this episode. Vel made her realize that Cassian's too important, and because Vel's whole argument is like Cassian means too much to the rebellion. Like he's too good at this work. He inspires people. He's a leader. He also follows orders. Like he does everything. He's like the perfect rebel. And a real manifestation of this is we see Cassian's prison mate Melshi join the rebel group on Yavin at the end of the episode. And that was a really neat moment. Showing the long, out at this point, that was like 4 years ago. It really shows like a long-reaching span of Cassian's influence on people.
If only Kino Loy would show up on Yavin too.
Can't swim.
Can't swim. See, but I like seeing Melshi come back from the prison. We knew he was in Rogue One, so I like the inclusion of him there.
Absolutely. And then at the very end, we see the KX unit get booted back up, and we've met our brand new friend K2. Anything else you guys want to say about episode 9 before I move on to the Rebels crossovers?
Just that K2, that moment with K2 was the first moment of levity we had in like 4 hours since the beginning of episode 7.
I think it's really nice to have just a little bit of levity. There has been some criticism and stuff thrown towards Disney Star Wars that everything becomes a joke, and when everything's a joke, then nothing is. But even with the intensity of the show, the drama, all of that, having just the barest moment of a little bit of humor thrown in, it lightens it up just a little bit. It brings you back that the rebellions are built on hope. Like these are the good guys fighting for a good cause. And it's not just always terrible, always down in the muck and the grime the entire time.
So one last thing we want to talk about is the way this arc intersects with Star Wars Rebels. Right now in the timeline, the big events that are happening are Andor and Star Wars Rebels. Very different pieces of media. Not ones that you would think would mesh together at all. And we've been expecting them. We knew eventually they would have to intersect in some way. And they have brought that to us. And I thought they did a pretty good job. This show doesn't do a whole lot of references to other Star Wars media, but this was an absolutely required one. And so we are intersecting with the Star Wars Rebels Season 3, Episode 18, Secret Cargo, where the Rebels go and they find out that Mon Mothma has given a speech to the Imperial Senate, and they need to help get her to safety on Dantooine / Yavin. We'll discuss that in a moment. So that episode came out, 7-8 years ago? 9, 10, oh my goodness, that might have been 9 years ago. So we've been preparing for this for a while. So as soon as we knew Gorman was going to feature in the season, we knew that this must also be addressed. And they intersect relatively well. There are some minor differences. Mon Mothma's hair and outfit in Star Wars Rebels is just upsetting and alarming, and I'm so glad they decided to give her better hair and a better outfit in Andor. Um, but the substance of her speech is also a little bit different as well. It's easy to say, they should have just copied the speech exactly. I think the speech they gave us in Andor was significantly more improved, and it should have been. Rebels, it was a small TV show. They're trying to get the point across. I think the way to really think about these differences is the way we think about a religious text, like the Journal of the Wills. We're given the same important information being recorded by different people, but the same vibe of the information is true. And that's definitely the case here. The same vibe of the information is true. She calls out the massacre on Gorman and she blames Emperor Palpatine himself in both speeches. The Andor speech is just a little bit more fleshed out and worded just a little bit differently. Um, and the big thing here is the way these two episodes intersect. So we're starting with Mon Mothma giving her speech in the Imperial Senate. And at some point after her speech, Bail makes contact with the Lothal rebels. And he arranges for them to help escort her to Dantooine. In the episode, our end game is Dantooine of Rebels. And in the episode of Andor Endgame is Yavin. We can reconcile that they hopped it to Dantooine first and met up with the rebellion and then all made their way to Yavin. Once Bail arranges that, Cassian at that point will get Mon to the safe house where Clay informs him that another team is going to escort her the rest of the way. That would be the ship that we see at the beginning of Star Wars Rebels Secret Cargo, where another ship is carrying cargo, who is Mon Mothma, to Yavin. As the rebels are refueling, the Empire is going to attempt to attack them again, and Mon Mothma has to flee on board with the Lothal rebels. On Yavin, Draven is going to reference Gold Squadron as arriving soon. And so Gold Squadron is, of course, the squadron that accompanies Mon Mothma with the Lothal rebels. So we're given these small references to them. It feels very much like they occur in the same universe. It's not a super apparent. We don't actually see the Lothal rebels, but there are some nice references. And then at this point, they would theoretically arrive on Yavin afterwards.
For those of you that have not watched Star Wars Rebels, like you've only watched more of the newer live action content, these are all the characters from Ahsoka. So this is like Hera and Ezra and Chopper are the ones doing this, and this ties into the stuff Thrawn is doing. And so I think they did a really good job. It's clear that either Tony Gilroy or the writers' room or the Lucem Story Group, they did a good job of like laying out the pieces here. And I would say they lined it up like 95% properly, and that's way more than they needed to do. They could have been a lot lazier with this than they needed to, but they did a good job tying it in. Actually, there's some like interesting storytelling with it. There's a line where Clea says they're going to have Mon give another speech to like change the narrative, basically, which that's part of the episode of Rebels of Mon gives a speech to all the rebellion to get all the rebellion to Nile and Yavin. And I think that was a good way to make that all fit together.
I really like when these separate stories start to intertwine even more. We've seen that with a couple other stories with Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian. That felt more obviously deliberate because they're being made around the same time. But I like that they're trying to connect these stories, make them work together, merge them together. It really helps when they fit together so nicely. It really, really makes sense. And it's really cool to see.
Any other thoughts, guys?
No, I'm just excited for the next arc where this felt like a finale, honestly. It felt
did.
like this is the culmination of the Cassian story, the Mon Mothma story, all of these different stories. Syril is obviously gone, but we still have some threads out there. Luthen is still on Coruscant. Dedra is still likely, maybe after Gorman's son, going back to the Axis search. And so I think that's where this last arc might center is centering on Luthen, his activities on Coruscant, Dedra and her search for Axis, and bringing that to a finale.
For the sake of my blood pressure, I hope it's Cassian and K2 just being buds.
I'm not optimistic. I'd take some blood
I'm not
pressure
optimistic.
medicine.
I think we'll get a scene or two of that. That's probably all I can hope for.
Yeah. So then these last 3 episodes are going to drop tomorrow as the airing of this episode. We put it on Monday. And we're actually going to take 2 weeks to wait until we put out our finale for Andor. We're going to be doing the final arc as well as our final review or our final overview of the entire series as it comes to a close. And so expect to wait just a little bit longer because I imagine there's going to be a lot of information for that episode. But then after that, we're pretty open. We don't have a show that's going on right now. We don't have a book that we're reading right now together. And so we're going to be doing some other content. If you have any ideas that you want us to tackle or talk about, leave us a comment, leave us a note of something that you would want to see us do. Because we look towards all Star Wars as good Star Wars. So we're willing to talk and look at anything that you may have interest in.
All right, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks. May the Force be with you.
Bye, everyone.
See ya. Thanks, everyone, for joining us to talk about the galaxy far, far away. You can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok as Rogue 3 Media. We look forward to talking with you at the next rendezvous point.